The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Tiara stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble floor of Hanul Group, Seoul's most powerful company. Every eye followed her, not just because of her beauty, but because of who she was, the woman the CEO had hired himself. Across the glass-walled office, Seo-Jung stood with his back to her, tall, broad-shouldered, a storm of cold power and quiet rage. He turned slowly, his gaze cutting through her like a blade. "Do your job," he said flatly. "Don't expect kindness. You're here for one reason only, to pay for what your people did." Tiara swallowed hard, not knowing the truth. The man standing before her didn't just want to destroy her career. He wanted to destroy her heart. What neither of them knew was that love was about to turn revenge into ruin. From the small rooftop window of her hostel room, Tiara Daniels watched the traffic below. People rushing, umbrellas clashing, everyone moving like they knew exactly where they belonged. She didn't. Not yet. It had been 3 months since she left Lagos. 3 months of chasing opportunities that kept slipping through her fingers like mist. Every rejection email was another reminder that she was different. Too foreign, too bold, too her. But Tiara wasn't the kind of woman who gave up. She was her mother's daughter, a woman who once told her, "If the door doesn't open, Tiara, knock harder. And if they don't answer, build your own door." Still, building a door was hard when rent was due and her last meal was cup noodles. The next morning, she sat in a crowded cafe with her laptop open, fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through endless job listings. Her savings were almost gone, and her student visa was running out. She needed a miracle. And then it happened. An email. Subject: Final stage interview, Hanul Group, CEO's personal assistant position. Her breath caught. "No way," she whispered, her pulse quickening. Hanul Group wasn't just any company. It was the powerhouse of Korea. Tech, real estate, fashion, everything under one empire. And at the top sat Seo-Jung Kim, a man whose face graced every business magazine. Ruthless, brilliant, cold. People called him the Iron Wolf of Seoul. Tiara's mind raced. She didn't even remember applying for a personal assistant position, but maybe fate had done what logic couldn't. That night, she ironed her only formal outfit, a navy blue blouse and cream trousers, and whispered to her reflection, "You're not just going to get this job. You're going to own that office." Her smile trembled, but it was still there. The next day, the Hanul Tower rose before her like a mountain of glass and steel, slicing into the clouds. Security guards, suits, high heels, and the energy of ambition filled the air. When she stepped inside, people stared. Some out of curiosity, others out of quiet prejudice. The sight of a tall black woman walking confidently into the CEO's floor was unusual. But Tiara had long learned how to make discomfort on her runway. At the reception, she smiled. "Good morning. I'm here for the CEO's personal assistant interview." The receptionist blinked, surprised, then forced a polite nod. "You're early. Mr. CEO doesn't usually see candidates himself." "Then I'll wait," Tiara said with a grin that masked her nerves. She waited for 45 minutes. Long enough to watch executives whisper and glance at her. Long enough for her palms to start sweating despite the air conditioning. Then, finally, the glass doors slid open. A man in a black suit stepped out, tall, sharp-featured, eyes like dark storms. He said nothing at first, just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Tiara Daniels?" "Yes, sir." "Come in." The office had vast floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline that stretched forever, and silence so heavy she could hear her heartbeat. Seo-Jung Kim stood behind his desk, flipping through her file. He didn't offer her a seat at first, didn't smile. "Nigeria," he said flatly, glancing at her resume. "You studied business and behavioral psychology?" "Yes, sir." "Double major. Fluent in English and Korean?" "Fluent enough to argue with you," she said before catching herself. "I mean, yes, fluent." He looked up sharply, one brow lifting. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, amusement or disbelief that she dared to joke. "You're confident," he said slowly. Confident, not arrogant, she replied. There's a difference. His lips twitched, almost forming a smile, then hardened again. You think you can handle this position? I can handle anything, sir. Even me. The question hung in the air like static. Tiara didn't flinch. Especially you. For a heartbeat, silence. Then he turned away, walking toward the window. You'll start Monday. 8 a.m. sharp. No excuses. Dismissed. She blinked. Wait, did you just say I'm hired? Do you always question good news? He said without looking back. Only when it sounds too good to be true. Then maybe it is. He finally turned, his gaze unreadable again. Welcome to Hanul Group, Miss Daniels. When Tiara stepped out of the building, the sun was shining again. She should have been thrilled, and she was, but something about the way he'd looked at her lingered. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something sharper, something personal. But Tiara brushed the thought away. For the first time in months, her dream was within reach. She didn't know she just walked into a trap woven from hatred, loss, and secrets buried deep beneath polished glass floors. She didn't know the man who had just hired her wasn't seeking help. He was seeking revenge. The sound of rain against the windows filled Seo-Jung's penthouse office, soft but restless like the storm brewing inside him. He stood in front of the wide glass wall overlooking Seoul, city lights flickering beneath a silver sky. His reflection stared back at him, a man whose empire was built on control, precision, and revenge. But tonight, control felt fragile. On his desk lay an old photograph, a family portrait taken 15 years ago. His father smiling, his mother still alive then, and beside them the little boy who believed that family meant forever. That illusion ended when a foreign investor, a man from West Africa, betrayed his father's company, triggering a collapse that ruined thousands of lives and led his father to an early grave. That man's name was Daniel Obesai, and the young woman Seo-Jung had just hired, Tiara Daniels, carried his last name. Finally, he whispered, a cruel edge in his voice. Let's see how it feels to lose everything. When Tiara arrived for her first day, the office floor was already humming with whispers. No one understood why the CEO had hired her personally. He rarely spoke to anyone outside the boardroom. She looked radiant in her soft cream blouse and curly hair pinned back neatly, a mix of confidence and nervousness lighting up her eyes. Good morning, she greeted the front desk, bowing slightly. Even her politeness irritated Seo-Jung when he saw her on the office monitors. She looks sincere, his assistant remarked. Don't be fooled, Seo-Jung replied coldly. Innocence is the best disguise. His assistant hesitated. Sir, are you certain she's the one connected to Mr. Obesai? Seo-Jung's jaw clenched. Her father's company, same surname, same region, same timeline. It can't be a coincidence. And what will you do with her? What my father never could make them pay. Every smile, every kind word, will be a thread I pull until she unravels. Tiara entered his office that morning, notebook in hand. Seo-Jung didn't look up. You're late, he said, though she wasn't. It's 7:55, sir. Then you should have been here at 7:45. She blinked, biting back a response. Understood. He liked the flicker of defiance in her eyes. It meant she had pride, and pride was easy to break. He spent the entire morning assigning impossible tasks. Meetings to schedule, reports to translate, phone calls in Korean with clients who barely tolerated foreigners. He expected her to crumble, but she didn't. By evening, every task was neatly organized and color-coded. She even brought him a fresh cup of ginseng tea before he asked. Here, sir, she said softly. You haven't eaten all day. He looked up for the first time. Their eyes met his cold steel against her gentle warmth. You think you can soften me with kindness? No, sir, she replied steady. I just think hungry people make bad decisions. For a second, the corner of his mouth twitched. Then he caught himself. Dismissed. But as she walked out, Seo-Jung realized he hadn't touched the tea. And yet, somehow, her scent lingered longer than the jasmine in the room. For days he tried to ignore it. Her laugh echoed faintly from the break room. the way she adjusted her glasses before typing. The quiet strength she carried was the kind he'd never seen in the women from his world of polished lies and plastic smiles. He told himself it was part of the plan, that the closer he let her get, the deeper she would fall when he finally revealed who he was. But every time he looked into her eyes, the script slipped. "You're staring, sir," she said one afternoon, not looking up from her laptop. "Am I?" he said, leaning back. "You do it often," she said casually. "Like you're trying to read me." "Maybe I am. Then let me save you the trouble. I'm an open book." "No one is," he murmured. Their eyes met. The air tightened. And in that quiet tension, Seo-Jung realized something terrifying. Tiara Daniels wasn't the naive target he imagined. She was a mirror, reflecting every scar he'd spent years hiding. That night, alone in his penthouse, Seo-Jung poured himself a drink and stared again at the photograph of his father. His chest tightened. He remembered his father's final words before the heart attack: "Don't hate the world, Young-ah. Hate turns kings into monsters." He laughed bitterly to himself. "Then I guess I've already become one." Still, his mind wandered, to Tiara's smile, to her warmth. The way she said "sir" was both respectful and challenged. Revenge had always been clean in his mind, black and white, until she walked in and painted everything in color. A week later, the company hosted its annual charity gala. Tiara was assigned to oversee logistics, a test Seo-Jung knew she'd fail, but she didn't. Instead, she turned the event into a masterpiece. The ballroom glowed under golden chandeliers, guests applauding her professionalism. When the chairman of another conglomerate approached him and said, "Your assistant is remarkable," Seo-Jung felt pride and hated himself for it. Later that night, he found her on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. "You did well," he said quietly. She turned, surprised. "Did you just compliment me? Don't get used to it." "Too late," she teased, smiling. "I might frame it." He fought the urge to smile back. Something inside him cracked, small, but undeniable. For the first time in years, Seo-Jung Min, the Iron Wolf, felt warmth. And that was the most dangerous part of his trap. Because somewhere between hate and desire, the hunter was starting to fall for his prey. The office was quiet that night. Too quiet, just the low hum of computers and the sound of rain brushing against the glass walls. Most employees had gone home hours ago, but Tiara was still at her desk, eyes glued to her laptop screen, typing reports that weren't even hers to write. She'd been working late all week. Every day, Seo-Jung seemed to invent new reasons to keep her there. Redo this file, cross-check those numbers, find that missing contract. He said it was about precision. But deep down, even he didn't know why he couldn't let her leave. Inside his glass-walled office, Seo-Jung leaned back in his chair, watching her through the half-open blinds. Her focus was unnerving. Every time he piled more pressure on her, she responded with calm determination. No complaints, no tears, just quiet strength. That strength both fascinated and infuriated him. He poured himself another glass of whiskey, eyes never leaving her. "You're supposed to hate her," he told himself. "She's the daughter of the man who destroyed your family." But then she looked up, tucking a stray curl behind her ear, and for a moment, he forgot why he ever started this game. "Miss Daniels." His voice came through the intercom, smooth but sharp. "Bring the quarterly files to my office." A pause, then her voice gentle, composed. "On my way, sir." Moments later, she stepped in, clutching a stack of folders. Her perfume, light vanilla and something floral, filled the room. Seo-Jung told himself not to notice, but he already had. "Here's everything you requested," she said, setting the files down. "You missed a detail on page 14. "Which one?" "You tell me." Her brows furrowed. "Sir, I checked every." "Then check again," he interrupted, leaning back with that cold authority that made even directors stutter. She exhaled, visibly holding back frustration. "All right." She sat at the edge of his desk, scanning the file again. Her fingers brushed the paper, her lips moving softly as she read. He shouldn't have been watching her mouth, but he was. And then, Her voice broke the silence. Page 14 is perfectly fine, sir. He met her gaze. Are you sure? Absolutely. He stood slowly, crossing the space between them until he was inches away. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. Seo-Jung reached for the file, but instead of looking at it, his eyes lingered on her face. You're not afraid of me, are you? Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something dangerously close to admiration. Careful, he said, his voice low. You might make me forget who's in charge. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Their eyes locked, fire meeting ice. For a heartbeat, the world outside vanished. Then, as if waking from a spell, Seo-Jung stepped back sharply, turning toward the window. We're done here, he said curtly. Yes, sir, she replied, her voice calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she gathered the files. When the door closed behind her, he exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. What are you doing, Jung? He muttered. She's the enemy. But even as he said it, his heart didn't believe it anymore. The next day, the building's power flickered during a storm, leaving only the emergency lights on. Tiara was stuck inside the conference room, surrounded by stacks of files and the fading sound of thunder. Seo-Jung entered minutes later, his phone flashlight cutting through the dark. You're still here? He asked. Someone has to make sure the reports don't vanish with the power. She joked lightly. He found himself smiling before he could stop. They stood in the dim glow, shadows dancing across their faces. The silence between them felt charged. You work too hard, he said quietly. And you pretend too well, she replied, looking up at him. Pretend what? That you don't care. The words hit him like a spark to gasoline. He froze, eyes darkening. You don't know what I care about. Then tell me. It's better you don't. She took a step closer. I don't scare easily, Mr. Seo. For a moment his guard cracked. His hand lifted instinctively, as if to brush a curl from her face, but he caught himself just in time, retreating with a deep breath. Go home, Miss Daniels, he said hoarsely. Before I forget, this is still a workplace. She didn't argue, but as she walked past him, she whispered, You already did. He didn't sleep that night. Days passed, but the memory of that night lingered. Seo-Jung grew quieter, less cruel and almost distant. Tiara noticed it, but she didn't press. Instead, she simply kept doing her job, sometimes slipping in small acts of kindness. A fresh cup of tea, a reminder to eat, a soft good morning, when everyone else feared to speak to him. And little by little, he started responding. Once, she found him staring at the rain through his window again. You like storms, she said softly. No, he replied. I like what comes after them. Peace. Silence. She smiled faintly. Maybe you just don't know what peace sounds like yet. He turned to her, something raw flickering in his eyes. You talk too much for an assistant. You listen too little for a boss. Their banter had become its own language, sharp, but intimate. Every exchange left something unspoken hanging in the air. He began finding excuses to call her in. Meetings that could have been emails. Tasks that didn't need supervision. Anything to keep her near. And every time she smiled at him, the revenge that once burned like fire began to cool into something far more dangerous longing. One evening, Tiara stayed behind to finish a report. Her hands were tired, her back aching. But when she looked up, Seo-Jung was still there standing at the window, tie loosened, expression unreadable. Still here? She asked softly. Couldn't sleep. Work? Something like that. She hesitated, then walked over and set a small paper cup beside him. Here, chamomile tea. It helps. You think tea can fix everything? No, she said, smiling. But it's a start. For once, he took it. Their fingers brushed just barely, but it was enough to send a jolt through both of them. He looked at her, really looked at her not as a target, not as the daughter of the man he hated, but as her. You're different, Tiara, he said quietly. You shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Their eyes met, And in that heartbeat, everything changed. Revenge no longer felt satisfying. Hatred no longer made sense. The ice had cracked, and through it, fire was breaking free. Morning light spilled across the glass walls of Hanul Group, soft and golden. But inside Seo-Jung's office, the air was colder than usual. He sat behind his desk, motionless, eyes fixed on a single line of numbers on his screen, numbers he wasn't even reading. He told himself it was control, that he was still the same man, that Tiara Daniels hadn't changed anything. And yet, he could still taste the ghost of chamomile on his tongue from the cup she'd left the night before. "You're losing focus," he warned himself. "Remember why she's here." But the voice that once guided him through every ruthless decision now sounded small, distant, and unsure. Tiara moved through the office with her usual quiet confidence. Everyone noticed it now. The way the CEO's assistant didn't cower when he passed. The way he spoke to her in tones softer than anyone had ever heard. Rumors started to swirl. Maybe she's special. Maybe she's the reason the Iron Wolf smiles now. Tiara tried not to hear them, but she did. And every whisper tightened the knot in her stomach. She had no idea why Seo-Jung alternated between warmth and distance. Why one day he praised her and the next he froze her out completely. But she had learned to stop expecting consistency from powerful men. Still, she couldn't stop caring. That evening, Seoul's sky broke open again. The rain coming in waves that blurred the city into a silvery haze. Tiara stood near the window, watching droplets slide down the glass. She loved rain. It reminded her of Lagos, of chaos that somehow felt alive. Seo-Jung appeared behind her quietly. "You like storms," he said. "They make everything honest," she replied. "No pretending when it rains." He stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "Honesty is overrated," he murmured. "Only to people afraid of it." Her words landed like a challenge. For a moment he almost laughed at the sound foreign. Rough. "You really don't fear me, do you?" "I don't fear broken things," she said softly. "We all are, in some way." Seo-Jung's throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to him. He wanted to walk away. Instead, he stayed listening to the sound of the rain and the rhythm of a heartbeat he swore he didn't care about. 2 days later, during a high-level meeting, one of the directors questioned Tiara's data summary. "Your assistant made an error," the man sneered. "Perhaps she doesn't understand how Korean accounting works." Tiara opened her mouth to respond, but Seo-Jung spoke first. "No," he said calmly. "She's correct. You're the one who didn't read the updated model." The room fell silent. The director blinked, humiliated. Tiara looked at her boss, shocked. He'd defended her. In public. After the meeting, she found him by the elevators. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I correct mistakes when I see them," he replied. "Still," she said quietly, "thank you." His eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again, as if the kindness had been a mistake. "Don't read the meaning into it, Miss Daniels. I only defend competence." "Of course," she said with a small smile. "Then I'll try to stay competent enough to earn it again." When the doors closed between them, Seo-Jung stared at his reflection in the mirrored panel. For the first time, he didn't recognize the man looking back. That night, his penthouse was too silent. He tried to bury himself in work, but every thought circled back to her. Her voice, her eyes, the way she refused to break under pressure. He opened the old folder again, the one with the files on her father. The more he read, the more the truth blurred. There were gaps, discrepancies, evidence that maybe her family hadn't been the villains after all. He slammed the folder shut, anger rising in his chest. "No, I can't." But revenge no longer felt clean, felt heavy, felt wrong. The next evening, Tiara was the last to leave the office again. As she turned to lock the door, her heel caught on a loose edge of the carpet. She stumbled forward straight into Seo-Jung, who had just stepped out of the elevator. He caught her instantly, his arms circling her waist to keep her steady. For a breathless second, neither moved. Her hands pressed lightly against his chest, solid, warm, too close. "Careful," he whispered. "I told you not to fall." You always seem to be around when I do, she murmured back. He could have let her go right then. He didn't. Something in the air shifted the space between revenge and longing, collapsing into something dangerous, electric. Then the elevator doors opened again and the spell broke. He released her abruptly, stepping back. Go home, Miss Daniels, he said, voice strained. Good night, Mr. Seo. She walked away, her heels echoing down the marble hallway. He watched until she disappeared, his pulse unsteady, his heart caught somewhere between guilt and desire. After that night, the change was visible. Seo-Jung smiled more rarely, but enough for people to whisper. He spoke to her differently, not as a tool but as a person. And Tiara, though still unaware of the storm beneath his calm, began to see glimpses of the man behind the mask, the loneliness, the quiet pain, the gentleness he didn't know how to show. Every conversation was a risk. Every look felt like a confession. The armor that had protected him for years was crumbling, and he didn't know how to stop it. Late one night, when the office was dark and only the city lights glowed below, Seo-Jung stood by the window again. Tiara's reflection appeared behind him, faint in the glass. She'd forgotten her bag and had come back quietly. You should get some rest, she said softly. He turned, startled. I could say the same to you. Rest doesn't come easy these days. Why? Because my heart keeps arguing with my head, she admitted, then froze. I didn't mean. He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. You're not the only one. Their eyes met in the half-light. No words, no distance, just the truth they'd both been running from. And in that moment, the cracks in his armor finally split wide enough for love to slip through. The days that followed felt like winter had returned to Hanul Group, even though Seoul's sun still shone bright. Seo-Jung was different again, distant, controlled. Every word he spoke to Tiara was clipped, polished, and professional. She didn't understand it. Not after the way he'd looked at her. Not after the softness she'd seen in his eyes. Something was wrong, and deep down she felt it coming. It started with a whisper of a quiet comment from one of the finance staff when she went to pick up a file. Strange, isn't it? The boss hired her after all these years, considering her father and all. What do you mean? Tiara asked carefully. Oh, the woman said quickly, realizing she'd said too much. Nothing, just office gossip. But the words her father echoed in Tiara's mind long after the conversation ended. Her father, David Daniels, the man who had died years ago, ruined by a corporate scandal he never explained. She'd taken the job at Hanul Group to rebuild her name, to prove she could rise above her past. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more updates. Drop a comment with your location so I can create more stories just for you.